I'd like to introduce our presenter, Kate Williams. She is an employment specialist with Adaptive Technology Services in San Francisco, California. She develops and conducts workshops specifically designed for visually impaired and blind job seekers in the Northern California Greater Bay Area. In addition, she's a career development specialist for the California Department of Rehabilitation. Kate's true passion is to assist visually impaired and blind individuals to realize their potential and provide them with superior job-seeking techniques, enabling them to acquire employment. Kate is going to tell you a little bit more about her own personal story during the webinar, and I'd like to thank her for coming and welcome Kate Williams.
Thank you, Chris. I thank you for the introduction, and I'm so glad that all of you joined us tonight. As Chris mentioned, I conduct workshops for visually impaired and blind job seekers. Almost all of my classes are filled with people who are either totally blind or who have profound vision loss. However, I must tell you that tonight you're the most special audience I have ever addressed. Why? Because I too have PXE. And although our stories are different, I think I can truly understand the complexities and the frustration that can come from the unique symptoms that show up with PXE. We're not like any other people. And I can also understand the fear that sets in when one feels I'm limited. I don't have the skills that I once did, or I cannot produce the way I once did. They are real fears, and I think that I understand them. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, because I think that's important for you to know some of what I've gone through. I'll never forget the day when I realized I was losing my vision. I was a human resources manager with a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company, and life was good, and I loved my job. And suddenly, images before me started to melt, and I could only see chunks of information, and it became very difficult for me to even prepare a report. I was beside myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. The diagnosis was not good. I had android streaks close to both of my macula, and my acuity in both eyes was extremely low. My right eye went first. I didn't know how to function. I lost my ability to drive, and I was no longer able to commute from my home in Laguna Beach to the company in Irvine. I don't know how many of you have been in Southern California, but you know we live in our cars. Without driving, I felt lost. I didn't know what to do, but I took a deep breath, moved to San Francisco, where they have a reputation for having excellent public transportation. It's frustrating sometimes, but I have to admit it's excellent. I accepted a job as an executive recruiter with a well-known firm in San Francisco, and I entered that job with very high hopes. 5 years into the position, I lost the vision in my left eye. I couldn't read resumes. I couldn't enter information into the database, nor could I could not function. I couldn't even see my computer screen. And I was one of those fortunate people because I did a lot of research. I had wonderful support, and I discovered adaptive technology. It saved my life. It saved my job, and I was able to continue in that job very successfully for the next 7 years before the company closed. And it was such a gratifying feeling. And maybe that's some of the reason that I generate the enthusiasm I do about working, because it happened for me. I would like to motivate you. I would like to inspire you. But I don't want to preach, and I don't want to come across as if I'm a Pollyanna thinker. But I am thoroughly and firmly convinced that you can find a job, that you can enrich your life with a job, enrich the tapestry of it by continuing to work or keeping your job. You know a little bit about my story. I know very little. I know nothing about you. And therefore, I feel somewhat challenged in being able to present to you the most relevant information that's going to assist you in your job. And so although I'm not talking to you right now, I want you to know that I am considering each and every one of your issues. If I can be so brave. Change slide, please. Where are you? Where are you when it comes to looking at your present situation? Are you having difficulty in performing your duties? Do you fear losing your position because you're not able to perform as you once would? I want to preface all of these next statements by the fact that if at all possible, I strongly suggest that you do these steps after you have done your research. By that, I mean that employers are more willing and more receptive to working with your problems if indeed you have solutions. It's just the way they work. So first of all, I would suggest that you determine what are your issues and tap into assistance. I might suggest the Department of Rehabilitation as a good place to start. In your state, that might be under a different name, but the whole Department of Rehabilitation is a federal program, and you can find them in every state. Once you connect with them, request an appointment time to discuss your issues. And when you're doing that, ask for an assessment. Many of those departments will actually send one to your office so that they can see your work environment and they can see the issues that you are faced with. Generally speaking, they will prepare an assessment and they will tell you what they think you need. That could include software, it could include equipment, it could include training. But what you need to do at this point is to emphasize the fact that you want to keep your job. You're asking them for tools. You want them to be able to enable you to function at an optimal level. So if you don't say that, things are going to happen to you and you won't be in control. So please remember to emphasize the fact that you want to keep working and you want the tools to do it. That's their job. Next slide, please. Loss of position due to vision issues. Oh, it's tough, isn't it? I understand. But there is help for you, particularly if you've recently lost a job. Again, contact your state or local department. Go through the same steps. Request appointments. They won't be coming to your office. They'll probably send you to a clinic, a low vision clinic, something of that nature, where they're going to be able to assess your situation. Request that assessment. And then based on the assessment, again, you have to be your own advocate here. Emphasize to them that you want to have the tools so that will enable you to conduct a job search. That's very important because without some of these tools, it's very difficult to conduct a job search. And that you want to prepare yourself for a new position. Next slide, please. For those that you have not worked in a period of time, maybe this is an onset of your vision loss some time ago. Maybe you've been doing interim volunteer work. Maybe you've been going to school. There are a number of things that you could have done that have kept you from looking at new opportunities. And in some respects, I say, lucky you, because you're in a unique position. So are those people that have never worked. This could be an opportunity. And here I might be talking in that Pollyanna voice again, but I truly do believe this. There might not be a time when you have the time to seek additional education, to build on your skills that you already have, to actually create an ideal position for yourself. You have the time to do that, or you have some time to do that. And I want to tell you that the federal government wants you to work. They want you to become part of the workforce. There are programs that will support you in those efforts. So take advantage of them. I highly recommend that you take some other steps to help you put your career together. Put it in perspective. Make it your job. Make it something that's ideal and it fits your personality. Next slide, please. You can, as I said, when you have not worked, go through the same steps as I just discussed before. I'm sorry. You can ask for training. You can ask for employment to aid you in equipment to aid you. You can ask for adaptive technology. I don't know if any one of you have, or all of you have been enabled by adaptive technology, but I find it quite phenomenal. Personally, I use Zoom text, and I use speech. I use a reader so that I can read these things back to me. I'm in the process of learning a program called JAWS, which is for totally blind individuals. It's a little bit more complicated, but the end result is that I'm able to use technology. Have you never worked? Well, if you're somewhat fearful of being able to find a job, and probably more importantly, keeping that job, you can go through many of the same steps. The department will work with you if you are truly a committed job seeker, but you need to be your own best advocate. You need to impress them with that. So I would say for those who have not worked or have not worked in a long time, make that call. Pick up the phone. Get started. If you don't get the kind of information you need from your Department of Rehabilitation, find other services that you can connect with who will support you. I don't know of too many services that don't want you to be working, so they're going to try to help you get there. There are a lot of them out there. Next slide, please. I'm having a partial list. I'm sure there are so many, but these are additional resources to your Department of Rehabilitation. I do a lot of training at the Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco. I find it to be just a marvelous place for people to go. They have activities for low vision. We have bike rides. We have sailing clubs, dance classes, yoga classes. And I will step back for a minute because I need to tell you that it was only recently that I started to be a part of the blind community. Having been in the mainstream, as I call it, I guess I didn't really know there was another life out there. And so I kept myself from doing quite a few things simply because I didn't think I could. And these clubs, the Lions Club, the Lighthouse, all of them have wonderful programs aside from the fact that they'll help you with your equipment. I know that the Lighthouse, for individuals that are over 55, all of the services, all of the equipment is free. It could be on a loan basis, it could be on a rental basis, and or free. So look at those organizations or companies that will provide you with the kind of equipment. There's a whole list here. I might mention that National Industries for the Blind actually has created several companies around the country where that's what they do. They hire people that do have low vision and are blind. It could be a very good resource for you if you're just starting out. And don't forget your PXE webinar website. Website. It has a fount of information. I could suggest several articles. I spent a couple of days ago going through it, and I was amazed at all of the perspectives, all of the help that's available to you there. So read through those articles. Next slide, please. Regardless of where you are, you could be working, you could be not working. If you're working, I will say that even if everything's going smoothly, even if you don't think there are any issues, if you have PXE, regardless of the kind of treatments you're receiving, the thought is grim, but there is a possibility that you could lose some of your vision, and you don't want to catch that. You don't want to be caught by surprise. Have your plans in place. You know what the first steps you need to take will be, and so that you're not caught in that doe in the headlights kind of a feeling. It can be quite frightening. And then even if you're employed, I might suggest that the mainstream workers always have this saying, have a resume in your back pocket, because you never know. Life happens. You don't know what's going to take place. You can't read into the future. So everyone should at least have a resume. It's going to be basic. You might have to update it. You might have to change it. But put that resume together. And we're going to be talking about that in just a bit. Next slide, please. I want to give you an opportunity to design a search, if you're actually searching for a job, to match your personality, your aptitudes, and your skills. I think it's very important. I worked with a lot of people in the mainstream who have taken a job just to have a job, And what happens is that at some point they become discouraged. They don't like going to work. They don't like what they're doing, and so they leave the job. And it creates a very spotty resume, particularly if you change industries all the time. And it's not what you want to create. So if you have an opportunity to do this, design your own job. I've seen some absolutely astounding results in this respect. I'm going to give you one example of a young woman who was in my class who had been blind since birth. She'd never worked. She'd done a lot of volunteer work, but she'd never worked. And she got to the point in her early 30s where she wanted to make some money. And I think even as importantly, I think she wanted to increase her self-esteem by saying, I have a job. And so during the workshop, she went through the steps that we're going to go through. She discovered that she had some talents she hadn't even recognized before. She was from another country. Her native language was Spanish. And it never occurred to her that she could use that skill and use that talent in a new way. She did go to school. She took 3 classes. She took a class in medical transcript, terminology, legal transcribing, and received a certificate in being an interpreter. Today, as a totally blind individual, she works more than full-time. She works from her home. She works with law firms, with medical firms, medical and hospitals. She works with insurance firms. And she takes calls and translates for the Spanish-speaking people into each of these non-Spanish-speaking companies and does all of the interpreting. She's making a bundle of money, and her self-esteem is just over the top. It's been really exciting. So that's the kind of things that you've never thought of before could be right there under your nose. Next slide, please. So I'm going to introduce you to something that is a tool in helping you to get to know yourself. And so the better you know yourself, I think the better you can set your goals. The Myers-Briggs personality test is something that some of you, and maybe all of you, have taken before. But even if you have, I would highly recommend that you take it again. It is a respected test. It's been used for years and years in corporate America to do team building, to train executives. It can be used by companies sometimes even in the application process. I've seen it happen more than once. It's kind of the standard of a personality type. So Terry was good enough to impose a screen, because when you go to the website of Human Metrics, this is the first slide that you are going to see. This tells you a little bit about what the Myers-Briggs is all about. Next slide, please. This is what, I want you to take the test. Now, it's 71 questions long. It is probably, I'm going to say, take you about 20 minutes. Don't think about what you're going to be, how you're going to be answering. Just instinctively answer the questions, because there are no right answers, there are no wrong answers. They're your answers. And the whole purpose of this test is to determine something about yourself. So you'll come up when you're on the website, take the test, click on Go to Results, and you're going to come up with a screen that looks something like this. In this particular case, there are letters that indicate the kind of personality type that this individual has. I'm not going to go into all of the details of what it means to be introverted, intuitive, feeling, or perceiving, because you will receive that explanation very clearly once you take the test. You'll be able to understand what all of that means. But go to the links that are below the results, and the second link that you will find says Identify Your Career. Click on there and you will see, next slide please, something like this. On the left-hand side of this slide, you will see suggested careers. In this case, they suggest that an individual look into counseling, religious education, perhaps teaching. That doesn't mean you have to go to school and get your degree. It means that you can teach at any level. There are always community colleges that are looking for people with experience, and it might be a good way for you to get your experience. Humanities, web design, there are so many careers that will fit your personality, and it's a great exercise to go through. Next slide, please. Now that you have determined your personality type and perhaps looked at a couple possible careers, I'm going to be sending you a worksheet in your handout. And it is entitled Designing Your Career Worksheet, oddly enough. So combining the information from your personality and your career search, there will be information for you to complete so that you're really getting a full picture of what your goals are. It will address company size. You know, some people like to work in a very small company. They like that closeness. Some people prefer to be part of a very large company with departments, or maybe small departments within a large company. Think about that because, again, you're designing your career. Geographical preference. Some of you may have several cities in your area. Some of you may be out in the country. Some of you may even consider moving at some point if the right position came up for you. But think about that. What are you willing to do? How far can you travel? How are you going to get there? And you will also be looking at industries and functions. Industries are different than functions. Functions are within an industry. For instance, if an industry that appeals to you is financial services, within that industry, you're going to find almost every function that there is. There's administrative support. There's probably public relations, advertising, accounting departments. The list goes on and on. And I think it's very interesting for one to look at what industries draw me. And within those industries, what functions am I interested in performing? You'll also determine a little bit about your cultural fit. And I do want to talk with you about this for a moment because when you go through that worksheet, I want you to know what that means. If you actually don't like, if you like your job, if you like your job, in fact, maybe you could even love your job. If you don't fit in the culture, you're going to leave. Eventually, you will leave. However, the opposite is true. Conversely, you could not truly love your job, but if you fit in that culture, if you feel you're part of it, you're going to tweak that job any way you can to stick around. So I put I determine cultural fit into two different categories, and although they are very extreme, perhaps it will give you an idea. And they are on your worksheet but not described. There's a loose culture. In a loose culture, you probably won't have a position description. When you walk into work in the morning, you probably never know what you're going to do that day. It can change every day. It can change every hour. The only thing that stays constant in a loose culture is change, and you can plan on it. It's going to happen all the time. If you're in the middle of a project, don't be surprised if your manager comes to you and asks you to start over again because the company has taken a different direction. These kinds of cultures generally are quite open. They probably don't have offices and cubicles. You might even be able to bring your dog to work. And this just doesn't happen in high-tech or startup companies. I've worked with a lot of law firms that actually operate in this manner. It's actually their culture. The other culture I'd like you to consider is what I call structure culture. And that does not necessarily mean stuffy. It doesn't mean something that's so traditional that you only do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. No, indeed, this kind of a culture is one where expectations are more clearly defined. You'll probably have a position description. It will list your duties. And there's a lot of room for creativity because you're probably going to spend most of your time in that area of the position description where your duty is other duties as required. It just happens that way, especially if you're a very motivated person. If you're in the middle of a project here, you're going to have probably a little bit of wiggle room to be creative, but it may be a more inclusive kind of project. You might not be doing it alone, and it's probably going to be tracked in some way, shape, or form so that the results are as anticipated by upper management. There's another portion on the worksheet to assess your skills and experience. If you have them, draw on them. You can use them almost anywhere, just regardless of where you're going to be looking for a new position. And then lastly on that worksheet, there is a portion for you to design your ideal position. And concentrate on the duties. Concentrate on the things that you want to be doing because it will direct you as you continue in your job search. Next slide, please. So we're going to, in a few minutes, we're going to start building a resume. But before we do that, I want to give you some statistics that might be a little bit alarming because these statistics come from the mainstream. They come from the job market, and because this is an extremely competitive job market right now. So if you send out 500 resumes and you're not getting any response and seem to go into a black hole, I can understand, because here are the statistics. 1 in every 200 resumes submitted is read at all. Part of that reason is because one position posted on a job board for instance, might attract as many as 1,000 people. I posted a job on Craigslist one afternoon at 4:30 a year and a half ago. So the job market hasn't changed much. It was pretty much at its low peak right then. But before 5:30, I had 500 responses. The next morning, I had over 1,500 responses. And, as of one person, I couldn't read through all those resumes. It was impossible. I had my office manager help me. I said, look for this, this, and this, and if they don't have it, put it in the wrong pile. So I would say that we only got through half of them. So half of those people that we received as respondents to the ad, we weren't even able to look at them. It was impossible. That's a lot of what happens. If you're one of the lucky ones and your resume is picked up, then a person that's reading it is going to make a decision to continue reading the resume in 10 to 20 seconds. Can you believe that? They're not really paying a lot of attention. They have certain things that they're looking for. And so that is why when we're building these resumes, we must generate the kind of interest that's going to keep them reading that resume and hopefully picking up that phone and calling you to set up an appointment. Next slide, please. So where do we begin in building a resume? We're going to do more than build the resume. We're going to put the other component with that. We're going to compose the cover letter. And that, as well, is very tricky and needs to be very directed. Both of these documents need to command their attention. They need to demand their attention. They need to catch their eye, as I said, immediately. Next slide, please. There are many kinds of resumes, and we'll go so far as to tell you that there's not one just perfect resume. You have to like your resume. You have to feel comfortable with it. So I'm not going to say that you have to follow these rules 100%. These are only suggestions, and they come from many years of having reviewed resumes, worked with people putting together resumes, and then on the hiring side and then on the placing side. The first resume that we're going to talk about will be chronological. Then we'll talk a little bit about functional resumes and combined. Next slide, please. The chronological resume. This is the one you're probably accustomed to seeing. It's the most traditional, and I should say that almost everyone that is staying in the same profession uses this format. And there's no section. Well, it has skills and accomplishment, but it's not directed toward just those skills and accomplishments. It's actually backed up with experience. So the focus is on the experience in that resume. Next slide, please. Within that chronological resume, excuse me, I'm sorry, I missed that slide. You'll find an example of a chronological resume on these next two slides. You'll notice that there's a summary of the qualifications. I'm going to come back to that in a little while because I think it's extremely important. And then the professional experience is listed. There's the listing of the company, where they're located, and there are dates all the way to the left-hand margin. I suggest this kind of a format because it doesn't leave a lot of white space. If you put the dates on the the left side of the resume, then it does provide a lot of white space, and your resume may not look as pleasing, and it may be a lot longer. So if you set it up on this kind of a format, it works very well. Under the name of the company and where they're located and the dates that you were with the company, you should put your title. You can use different fonts. You can underline some of these things as long as you feel that it is pleasing. And then we are going to discuss the meat of the resume, which is your professional experience, the assertions as we call them. Next slide, please. A functional resume. This is generally used when a person is changing careers, or it's used a lot when people have spotty employment records. You know, maybe they've been someplace for 6 months, maybe they've been someplace for 2 years, but then they changed careers, they went somewhere else. And the purpose of this resume is to highlight only the skills and accomplishments. It pays very little attention to the actual where were you and what did you do while you were there. You know, several years ago, this was the hot thing. Almost everyone was putting their resume into a functional resume format because it gave them an opportunity to talk about themselves in glowing terms. And that's part of the problem with a functional resume. They're really not favored by employers any longer. I work with many employers who will not accept a functional resume if I'm presenting a candidate to them. They simply refuse. Because the first thing that comes to most employers' minds in these days is, what are they hiding? They've had too many people across the desk from them who have talked about their supervisory experience, and in the interview they find out that it was in a family volunteer business or something. And so it's not that that work is bad, it's just that the employer feels that you hoodwinked them, so to speak. So you can consider these kinds of resumes. I'm not saying they are not valid. They do have a purpose, but I want you to be aware they're not frequently appreciated or considered by an employer. Next slide, please. So one might think that, gosh, the greatest idea would be perhaps to have a combined resume. Then I could take a little bit of the chronological resume, a little bit of the functional resume, and put them together. And it would have its obvious advantages because you're getting the point across. But I'll tell you the disadvantages. They become longer. They become somewhat repetitious. It's difficult to have a skill and an achievement that you're describing, and then when you're backing it up with your employers, then indeed you've made your resume longer, and you could lose the interest of the person who's reading it. Next slide, please. Here's an example of a combined resume, and I think you'll see what I mean. The professional focus is another way of saying a summary, and then the person talks about their management skills, and they make some pretty emphatic statements here about having increased revenues by 35%. In the next area, and they'll probably have a lot more combined skills here as they do in a functional resume, leadership skills. It points to some of those things that took place when they were in their position. Next slide, please. Going on with that same combined resume, you can see what happens, that now the person has to back up the summary of their skills. They're going to have to back it up with facts, and so again, they have to enter the company again, enter the position again, and then back up what they put into the functional part of the resume. Next slide, please. So I think you probably have a message. I believe in chronological resumes. I should say that there are exceptions to this. Individuals who are in academia, law, sciences, they're going to have a completely different kind of resume. It's called a curriculum vitae, and it's a CV. The format is different, and it generally contains information about publications or about specific research that they've done. I'm not addressing individuals who will have those specific needs. I'm addressing the people, everyday people, who are going to benefit, I think, from a chronological resume. I'm going to tell you that instead of that functional part of the resume that's on the functional and on the combined, you can achieve very much the same thing by starting your resume with a summary. So we're going to discuss a summary, the assertions, the skills, and the education. Those are the basic parts of a resume, a chronological resume. I'll tell you a little bit more about other considerations you can have later on. Next slide, please. Summary statements. As I said, these are the statements that interviewer, that reader, is going to read first. The hiring manager is going to read it first. Someone in human resources is going to read it first. That's the first thing they're going to see after your name and address is your summary statement. So make sure that it's a concise statement. Make sure that it comes to the point. Make it fit their needs. Give them a compelling reason that they should continue reading your resume. And then you're going to want to, as I said, grab their attention and illustrate outstanding qualities that you feel will be required in the position where they're seeking a candidate. Next slide, please. Here's an example of some summary statement. It's a summary statement. In your handout, I provided you with several more because, but I think you can get the idea. You're going to be using power words. You're going to be drawing their attention to words like expertise, not just experience, but expertise in emergency medical services. And then a recap of the talents, of the skills that you had to use in that job and that are going to be necessary in the next job if you're staying in the same profession. If you're changing professions, look for those kinds of skills and achievements that would more closely resemble that which the employer is seeking. Next slide, please. So, excuse me. We're going to move on. So, in fact, I think it's a good thing for an individual after tonight. Maybe sit down, make a summary statement on yourself. Start practicing on it because it's extremely important. The next section in your chronological resume will be the assertions. That's the meat of your resume. And you should not just be informing when you're putting down what you've accomplished. You need to create interest. You need to create excitement about what you've done. In the handout, I will be including power words. They're going to be coming to you in the handout. And they really will help you put together how you describe each of your positions. Now, when you're putting your assertion portion together, you're going to list all your previous positions, all the companies, the duties, and I want to tell you that if you are putting together a resume and you have a very long, let's say you've worked for 25 years, you do not have to list all positions for the previous 25 years. The rule of thumb is go back 10 years. But I will say if you have had a position prior to that and it's very relevant to the needs of the employer, you might want to consider including it. But you only need to go back for 10 years. The dates will be required, and when you are listing the dates, be sure that you list the month and the year, not just the year. Employers are wise. They know if someone started in 2001 and left in 2002, that may not mean a whole year. The person could have started in December of 2001 and left in January of 2002. So be sure to put your months and your dates. And it comes in handy because when you fill out an application, they are going to need those dates. So in those assertions that you're putting down, be sure to put them in bullet points. Use power words. Use things that create excitement, that show involvement. They describe what you've done more than just experience included. Next slide, please. When you're doing your assertions, list them, your positions, in chronological order, and start with the most recent job. I think all of you know that, but I'm just reminding you. And make it, if there's relevance in the job that you've recently done, make sure that this is the one where you load it up with all kinds of information that is going to be important to the employer. Because, as I said, this is, once they go from your summary, this is where they're going to go. right away. They're going to go into that first job, that your most recent job that you have. And then list your other jobs that you've had after that in descending order. And I will say that the more, if you have a lot of positions, don't be redundant, and don't put as much information in the previous jobs that you've held as you have in the most recent position, because your resume will be too long. It's a good time for me to address the fact, how long should a resume be? I've heard a lot of people come into my office and they've said, I understand I'm only going to have a one-page resume, and I just can't possibly do that. There are schools of thought that would say you should contain your resume to one page. I think most recruiters definitely don't believe in that. I think if there's information and it's important, you should feel very comfortable going on to a second page. I think a third page might be a little lengthy because the reader may become tired, may not continue reading it, but you can feel very comfortable with a two-page resume if that's needed. When you're describing your duties and responsibilities using those power words, it's important that you keep in mind that one size does not fit all. If I leave you with nothing else about cover letters, resumes, I want to tell you that if you have a basic resume and you're sending it out and you're not getting results, or if you have a basic resume and you're sending it out to everyone, it's not going to work. There's too much competition out there. There's too much going on, and they're not going to pay attention to your resume unless you're giving them what they want. So it's your responsibility when you're putting together your resume that you are paying attention to that. Obtain a position description from the prospective employer, and we're going to go into that in a little while. But look at what they want and then turn around and give it to them. I think that's one of the reasons I really like bullet points. Next slide, please. It's because you can move them around. They have a lot of flexibility. You can, if something's most important to the employer, the prospective employer, and it's the last bullet point under your responsibilities, move it to the first position. So it's the first thing they're looking to. Now, you may, after you've completed your assertions, you may want to consider other assertion statements. You may have won some awards. You could have a heading for awards. You may have some professional affiliations that will be credible to the prospective employer. Perhaps you've been very involved in civic and community affairs. That might be very important for you to include. For those of you who have never worked, or for those of you who have made a good, wonderful career with volunteer experience, that's acceptable. Put it on your resume. If you've only worked one job in the mainstream and you've worked 5 jobs in volunteer experience, what you've gained there is very important, and I think that it's appropriate for you to include that. You can also have a section for publications. This is generally limited to CVs, but there are instances when you may have experienced that and you'd like the employer to know that, particularly if it's relevant to the prospective job. Next slide, please. These are some of the assertion statements. Actually, I took all of the resumes that are samples here from my files. They're real people and they're real resumes. I'm not saying any one of these resumes is perfect, but they do illustrate the point. You can see this is a young woman that is working as a totally blind person as a telephone interpreter. I had actually forgotten that I'd included that. She has the name of the company, dates on the left-hand margin, the name, her title, name, and then under that she is describing her duties in bullet points, very clearly, very concise, and she is describing what she does. If she goes to another interpretation company, she'll have a lot of information that's going to be very valuable. Next slide, please. The next section, or the next heading on the chronological resume is skills and accomplishment. Now, your skills, I think, should be limited. You know, they are the hard skills. This is not a place for you to put that you have a good personality, that you're a great communicator, and that you pay attention to detail. No one's going to believe all those things. They might be true, but everyone else does them. So you want to make these hard skills. So for instance, they could be your technical skills. Perhaps you have Microsoft Office Suite, including Word, Excel, PowerPoint. List them. Don't, at this time, try to give them your level of proficiency. So don't say I'm proficient in Microsoft Suite, knowledgeable in Adobe. No, don't go there. Just list all of the skills that you have. If you're able to work in that particular software program, then list it. Another thing that people frequently forget are language skills. Those are hard skills. If an individual is able to speak more than one language, you can put written and verbal skills. If you're only conversant, you can put conversant in another language. But it can be, and you don't know at this point, a valuable skill to the prospective employer. Next slide, please. So here are some examples. Now you've put your skills down. Now you're going to have some of your accomplishments. Gosh, the person on this page really has done a lot, but perhaps you have as well. But this is a place for you to, I guess, blow your steam a little bit, toot your horn, let them know the things that you've done. I suggest that you really search through your past jobs and envision yourself walking in the door. Make a list. Envision yourself walking in the door in the morning. Look at all the things that you've done. You've accomplished so much more than you think you have. And this is a good place for you to put those accomplishments. It's going to see them, let them see the benefit of hiring you. What are you going to accomplish for them? At this point, that's really all they care about. Some individuals prefer to take their accomplishments and place them at the end of each employer as a separate bullet point, or perhaps moved over to the left-hand margin, say accomplishments, and then put something like this. So you have a choice there. You can put the accomplishments under the employee, or you can put them in the skills and accomplishments section. If there are no accomplishments, that section will simply say skills. Next slide, please. Education. You know, this is very straight, right? You know, there's not too much of a mystery here. Put the name of your school, the city, and the state, and then in the left-hand margin to keep, the right-hand margin to keep the format the same, you can put the year of your degree. This year is a debatable thing. If you're a recent college graduate, absolutely. In fact, as a recent college graduate, you might want to move your education up to the top. That's an option for you. If not, if you graduated 25 years ago or 35 years ago and you're really not so keen on having a prospective employer know the year you graduated, don't feel awkward about leaving the date off. The important thing is that you have the name of your school, the city and the state, and then the level of your degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree. That would be appropriate. And if your major was something that would be informative, you may choose to include that as well. Next slide, please. Remember, keep your resume simple, keep it concise, and that's the same thing you're going to do with your cover letter. I can't tell you how many, hundreds, I've sat with hundreds of employers looking through resumes and cover letters, and I think this is one of the most frequently heard complaints from hiring managers. Why do people use their resumes to tell me everything about themselves? Why do they fill in all the holes with information? No, they're not interested, and I hate to be very harsh about this, but at this juncture, that employer doesn't really care anything about you. They only care about what you're going to bring to them. So when you start your cover letter, don't start the paragraph with something like, I recently relocated to San Francisco. I recently graduated from college. After 25 years, I was laid off. I took a year off from work to care for an ailing parent. They're important to us. We feel that we need to let them know. It's kind of like we're coming up with excuses for perhaps there not being a perfect resume. But I can tell you right now, the employer doesn't care. They're interested in their needs, not your story. So you need to compose a cover letter that's going to generate, just as it did, your resume. You want them to turn to your resume. You want to give them only little teasers there so that they're going to turn to your resume. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you the components of that cover letter. It starts out very simply. It's like a business letter. You're going to want to have at the top the date, and you're going to want to have your name and your address, and then you're going to move into an introductory paragraph. You're going to have a qualifying section and a closing paragraph and a closing salutation. It's very much a business business letter, excuse me. Next slide, please. So here's an example of how it's going to be laid out. It's going to be the date, your name, your address, your city, and your email address. I think in today's, most of us are sending our emails by, our resumes by email, so I would include that. Attention to, if you have the name, Miss Gloria Steinbeck, and the title, if you have the title, and then the name of the company. If you don't not have the name of the person that you are addressing, do put the name of the company. If you do not have the name of the individual that you're addressing, you can put words like dear hiring manager, dear decision maker, dear human resources professional, but I think I would stay away from to whom it may concern. You can make it a little bit more intimate by putting this kind of information. Next slide, please. The introductory paragraph. You may think I'm making this too simple, but I can tell you it works. I've worked with many, many people who have been so discouraged because they haven't had calls back, and they've changed to this kind of a format, and all of a sudden they're getting calls, they're getting interviews, because it's precise, it's to the point. All you need to tell them is who you are, the position you're applying to, how you learned about the position, and then a lead-in sentence that has them read about your qualifying experience. Next slide, please. For instance, dear Ms. Steinbeck, my name is Jane Doe. I'm applying to the administrative assistant position presently available in your human resources department. Now, the next sentence is going to have many resources. It could be that you found it on a job board. It could be that a friend referred you. It could be that you've done research and located a company, and you're writing to them because you want to work with them. So whatever the reason, be very clear about that. If you saw it on a job board, refer to the job board, refer to the date, and refer to the title, and that's it. If you have had a referral from a person that's in the company, let them know. I was referred by John Doe, an employee of your organization, or John Doe, a member of your management team. Let them know how you heard about the position. It makes you more credible. In this particular instance, the individual says, I've researched many companies and in my area of expertise, and I find that we share many common values, and it's nice to say something that kind of makes them feel special. If you want to insert something like, I've placed your company at the top of my list in company in those that I would most like where I would most like to work, something like that is okay, but don't go into a whole story. The closing sentence in this first paragraph should read something like this. Below are several compelling reasons I would like you to consider my candidacy, with a colon. It's the perfect lead-in to letting them know that you are qualified to do that job. Next slide, please. This is when I was talking about getting a position description. It should be for your resume, but I decided I would spend more time on it here. Position descriptions allow you, having a position description for the position to which you are going to be applying allows you to know more about what they want. And I keep saying it over and over again. You have to give them what they want. So there are several ways in which you can contain a position description. If you found a position on a job board, it's going to have it there. It's going to be under duties and responsibilities. If you go to their company website, if you're doing research and you go to their company website, Sometimes they have the jobs posted right there. And if you haven't found it there are other ways you can get it. Maybe you have a friend or colleague that's in a similar or the same company or same positions. Ask them for their position description. If all else fails, go to a compensation site, something like salary.com. You're going to find salaries there, but you'll also find a position description, albeit quite brief. The point is, you want to find out what they want. You want to turn around and give it to them. So you list your experience and accomplishments under each area within your qualifications. These should be listed in bullet point format. You can have anywhere from 2 to 4 bullet points. I don't suggest less than 2, no more than 4. And that last bullet point can be something about your personal attributes. Like you've never missed a day of work, you're industrious, you have initiative, and relate it to the position. Next slide, please. Here we have an example of someone that's done just that. The person is applying to that administrative assistant position, and so they immediately tell them without lifting from their resume, they're capsulating what is on their resume by saying they have over 10 years of experience supporting senior management, they in a human resources department, and that they most recently with a leading pharmaceutical company, something like that. If it's a pharmaceutical company, don't tell them that. If it's a manufacturing plant. And then perhaps proven ability to do slide presentations, proven ability to have excellent travel skills. Whatever it is that's most relevant to that employer as listed in the position description, turn around and give it to them. Again, you can move these bullet points around depending upon their needs, or add or subtract bullet points if they don't suit their needs. That last bullet point I talked about could be something creative. You could say something, my record speaks for itself. I've never missed a day of work in 10 years. My previous managers will attest to the fact, on and on and on. You get the point? You can put something about yourself that you're particularly proud of. It's not inappropriate in a cover letter, but it shouldn't be the main focus. And it's where you can use personal pronouns, I should say. You can do it in a cover letter. You cannot do it in a resume. No personal pronouns in a resume. Next slide, please. The closing paragraph. You're going to thank them, and you're going to give them a brief statement of your interest level. You may want to even talk a little bit more about your the reasons that you're interested. And you want to ask for the interview. You want to give them the information where they can contact you for that interview. And the next slide, please. Here's a sample. Thank you for your consideration. I can reach that 555 on and on to arrange for an in-person meeting. I like the word meeting better than interview, but you can certainly put your own wording there. I inserted something here because I wanted to bring to point that some people like to follow up, and that sometimes is a good idea. But if you are going to have a sentence that says I'm very serious about my application, I would like to follow up with you on such and such a date, you'd be absolutely certain that you follow up on that date. Because if you don't, you've lost. And then to make a statement like, maybe I believe I would be a positive contribution to your company and to your senior management and human resources group, kind of recapping it. So ask for the position. Tell them you're interested. Next slide, please. The closing paragraph, closing salutations, would be regards. Don't say sincerely. It's not a good thing. You could put regards, best, your name, and then have a note that the resume is attached. I know I've gone through this quickly. I know it might have been a little bit boring because resumes, cover letters are not really exciting. I conduct a 30-hour workshop, and two of our weeks are spent on resumes and cover letters. So I've tried to condense it as much as I can and to give you the salient points. But I do have a few remarks to make before I take questions. When you are putting your resume together and you feel it's all in shape, spell check, spell check, spell check. Read it through. Read the resume through, and then read it once again, and then spell check once again, because spell check does not always check does not always catch those errors. You and your can make a huge difference in the way in which you're presenting yourself. So, and then have someone else read that resume. Have them look for your errors. You know, when we look at something of our own for so long, we miss so much. So get another pair of eyes in there. Have them check it out. Because I can tell you something. That resume needs to be in capital letters, perfect. No mistakes. No bullet points. I mean, no periods where they shouldn't be. No commas where they shouldn't be. It has to read perfectly. I can't tell you how many managers I've worked with who absolutely just, they automatically dismiss the resume from an otherwise well-qualified candidate because they found an error in their resume. It kind of tells them the kind of attention you pay to detail in a job. And then print your resume out before you send it out. I don't care. Print it out on, if you're emailing it, print it out. If you're mailing it, print it out before you email it, because the first thing they're going to see is not the content. The first thing they're going to see is the resume, and it needs to look pleasing. You have to have your margins even on the top and the bottom. You need to know that it doesn't look crowded. You need to know that the bullet points are all aligned. It needs to look good. And so be sure that you check it out, because it says you. It tells them who you are, and you want that to be absolutely perfect. You want them to pick up the phone and to call you for an interview. Don't be tempted to put colors and fancy fonts and clever little doodads on your resume. They detract from you. They don't add to you. They detract from the message you're trying to give to the employer. In the handout that I'm sending you, there are many examples of what we've talked about. But I do want to tell you that also in the handout I've offered the fact that I am available to help you. I can't promise each and every one of you that I'll get back to you immediately if you email me, but I will make a concerted effort to answer your questions or help you with your resumes. Chris, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. You were just talking about printing it and no mistakes. So we have a question from someone who said after creating his resume, he often has to post it or send it online with an automated application system, and feels that at that point everything about the formatting goes south.
Yes, it can happen. I've seen it happen. What that individual might want to do, and even though company websites might be a little different, the person might try sending resumes to several other people. I've received resumes where it looks perfect when they send it, and when I get it, it's all askew. I don't know what makes that happen. I mean, it is a glitch, and perhaps websites on company websites where you fill out application, it's going to go askew. But if that's the way their company website works, everyone will be getting they'll be getting everyone's resume like that. But try sending it to another individual and have them open and or print the resume to see if that alignment and that format has stayed the same.
Okay. And the second part of that question is the online application often asks the same questions that you're addressing in your resume, and how would you deal with that?
I try to condense it. I try to give them brief and concise answers, and let the resume develop those points. If that happens, there are some websites that don't want your resume. I mean, they're just using their application for your resume. So make note of that, because you know there are sometimes that ask you not to submit it. I wouldn't be concerned about lessening the impact that your resume might make by the information that you give them in an application, but just make it more brief, make it more concise, and make it more to the point.
Okay, thank you. And what about posting resumes to online sites like monster.com? Do you have any opinions?
Ooh, you may not like what I'm going to say. I think it's okay to post them in a couple of websites that you feel have been extremely good to you. In other words, if you're seeing the kinds of jobs that you want on those websites, you might give it a try. I personally think that it's almost a waste of time, having been a recruiter. I think I tried it once, and it was such a quagmire, and usually what I saw posted there was for lower level jobs, and I'll tell you what happens to them. They other people that come in after you, your resume keeps going down the list. So you could have posted your resume 2 days ago, and when a recruiter goes to look for that resume, there might be 100 before yours. So I think it might be, in my opinion, it's a waste of time.
Thank you. All right, I have another question. This is from a person who's quite frustrated in her job search, and because she knows that one of the more noticeable things about her resume, and she calls it a red flag, is that she didn't work for 14 years, and that was due to a period of time when she had vision loss. But she has gone back to college and graduated with a degree in network administration, but she's put out over 500 resumes and can't get an interview. Do you have any suggestions?
I do. It's not the first time I've heard that. I hear it more oftentimes than I hear, guess what, I have an interview. I think that's because of the way in which we're submitting our resumes. I have a sense, I'm not certain of this because I can't talk to the person, but I have a sense probably most of those resumes went out from job board postings. And we're going to discover a lot in the next webinar. I'm really hoping that a lot of you can join us then, because that's when we start having fun. This was the nuts and bolts, and it's not a lot of fun. But there is a great deal of pleasure and enjoyment you can have when you start a job search by switching up the search. I want to give you an incredible statistic. Only 4% of people are finding their jobs from job postings in these days. And that's pretty astounding, and it's a real figure. It used to be quite a bit more popular, but companies are inundated with resumes. You have a great deal of competition. Most of the people aren't able to read your resume. They could find another resume that more closely aligns with their needs, and so they won't even open your resume. So it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of disappointment. It seems to go into a blank hole. So the first thing I would invite that person to do is come to the next webinar and learn about some different kind of search techniques, because we talk about the hidden job market, and they are out there. I'm going to say one of those things that I think is important for an individual to look at is networking, and I'm not talking about being on Facebook. I'm talking about doing real networking. Talk to your friends. Talk to your relatives. Talk to your friends' friends and your relatives' friends. Let everyone know that you're looking for a job. Ask them to help you out. You're probably not going to find all of your job opportunities on the job board. And I think the more targeted you are in your search, and the more targeted your resume is to that search, the more success you're going to have.
And this one part of her question that I neglected to say is that she has had a few interviews, but they don't go well after she discloses that she has vision impairment.
I absolutely knew this was going to come up. It comes up all the time, disclosing our disabilities. I'm going to give you an answer, and I'm going to have a caveat to that answer. When I first started conducting workshops, this question came up a lot, and I look back in my history, and I have a confession to make. I went on a job interview when I lost my job as an executive recruiter in another city because I considered living close to my children. And I set up 2 appointments, and I went to the first appointment, and they asked me to complete an application. I hadn't revealed my disability, and I looked at that application and realized I couldn't fill it out. But I sneaked into a little corner and ensconced myself, kind of hiding, and took my magnifier out and tried to complete that resume. And then I came to the word, what you can't ask this today, but at that time they could ask the words, are you able to drive? And I had to answer no, because an application is a legal document. I learned from that I hadn't disclosed my disability, and I knew right away they weren't going to interview me. They did, but it was a courtesy interview, and I knew it. So knowing this and knowing my experience, I consulted with some of the leaders in the field of employment for the blind and visually impaired. I went to Mr. Brian Bashan, who is the executive director of the Lighthouse, and he also did years and years of career counseling for upper-level individuals losing or have lost their vision. And it was his opinion, and he was very, very set on this, that It was his opinion that the position, your disability should be disclosed after you have secured an interview and before you go on the interview. And he was very firm, and the reasons for this was that he's seen a lot of people, particularly if you carry something like a cane, or particularly if there's something very visual about your vision loss, it instantly sets up almost a feeling of distrust between you and the person who's going to be talking with you. So they wonder, why did you hide this from me? And there are some clever ways that you can disclose that before you go on the interview. You can say, I have some vision issues. Can you tell me, do I go north or left on XYZ Street? It's kind of a soft way of putting it, but at least it's letting them have some kind of a hit. There are some ways you can do that. But, since giving that kind of information to my workshops, I've received so many, opinions that don't match with that. And their opinions are valid. I think I've had people tell me, I don't tell someone until I've already know I've generated interest. I think you almost have to play this by ear, and in the next webinar we're going to be going into detail with this. But I think you need to use your common sense. If you're going to have 5 interviews and you don't carry a cane and your vision loss is not an apparent thing, then you may want to wait until the 3rd or 4th interview before you start addressing it and let them know how it affects you. If you let them know about your disability, you also should, I think, let them know what you can do. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, I'm saying yes. I think that's a great answer. I know we've gone about 15 minutes over, and if you have more time, Kate, I have a few more questions.
If everyone wants to stay on, I'll be here all night.
All right. We can stay on. There's no constraint there, so I'll put a couple more questions to you.
Okay.
We have someone who wonders if you should put something about the state of your health on your resume or a vision statement on your resume.
No. In fact, I would go so far as to say in today's privacy acts and so on and so forth, you find that applications are changing, resumes are definitely changing. You don't need to disclose anything about your personal life. In fact, it's not legal for them to ask you, and I don't think it should be included on the resume. It does come, a little bit of that comes under disclosure, but I don't think that should be on the resume unless you are applying to a position that is going to be working with the disabled or visually impaired, and you have specific software that's related to that, or specific kind of skills having a disability. You would probably want to include it then because it becomes an enhancement. But on a general resume, it should not be included.
Thank you for that answer. And then there's a question about the handouts. You mentioned handouts, and we are going to be either emailing or mailing the handouts to everyone who attended the webinar.
That's
so I just wanted everyone to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And the one man asks, where do recruiters go to find resumes?
Recruiters have a number of little tricks, and more and more and more. And to those of you who don't like the word networking, you may not like to hear this, but more and more I find that hiring managers and recruiters are going to network sites like LinkedIn. And it's a professional website, and I've even read of some CEOs who use it as their only method of finding potential candidates because they trust their friends. They trust people that they already know. They trust that they will know people who have similar skills. So I think that recruiters, some of my recruiters, friends who are still in recruiting and doing executive search, have up to 500, 600 people on their LinkedIn. And each of those 500, 600 people have another 500 or 600 people who are linked into them. So you can look at the potential there, and you're generally going to find a very professional individual listed on LinkedIn, so that's one source. Very rarely do they go to job boards, but I'll tell you what they really rely on. They rely on their personal referrals. If they've been a recruiter for a long time, they know people who have done the same position that they're recruiting, and so they're going to call those people first. Who do you know that's done a good job? Who can you recommend to me? That's their primary resource. It's building their referral base.
There's another question that was sent in before the webinar started, and it's from someone who is more the creative type. She teaches art and gives tours in museums, which is getting especially hard because of her vision loss. And she says it seems like the left brain people have more adaptable skills. And
oh.
So how would
I'm sorry, I beg to differ. I love working with the creative right brain people. They're so much fun to work with because they are creative. And so I'm not trying to put off an answer to that question, but because that brain is so creative, it's amazing what they can come up with as alternatives to what they're presently doing. I mean, if they're working with people with, and maybe they could be an artist, and maybe they aren't able to paint or sculpt as they once did. So maybe some of the things that they can be looking at or considering teaching, instructing people how to do it. A lot of people teach people how to dance, and they don't dance. So I think that the person's lucky to have that right brain going for them, because I think it's a little bit easier to tap into all that creativity. Lots of opportunities.
Good. And I think this is the last question. And this person had an employment counselor suggest to him that the cover letter should address each requirement stated in the job description so that it shows you meet all their requirements.
Well, I tend to agree with them. But I don't know, you can have 10 duties and responsibilities on that position description. And I think if you take a little bit of work, you can probably combine some of those needs and put them in your bullet points. But I don't think you should have a 2-page resume and address every single little point. I think you should start with the first one and make that the most important one, because I'll tell you, those position descriptions are legal documents. They're put into place by people in human resources who are on the compensation and benefits portion of human resources, and they're designed in a strict way that the first duty is the one that has the most, I guess, weight to it, if you will, and the words that they use in that position description slot the position into a specific compensation. So they know what they're doing, and so they're not just going to throw a bunch of things on a page. That first one's the most important, second, third, so on. And so I don't think if you have 15 things that you need to address all 15, try to combine some of them so that you're able to address it, but I think a cover letter should be on one page.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of everyone who attended and of PXC International, I thank you so much for presenting this webinar. And I'd like to let everyone know that part 2 of your webinar series will be on July 28th, and will cover many things, including disclosing your disability and how to keep your job. And you can register for that webinar on our website. And Kate, I want to thank you for being here with us tonight and taking all the time to try and condense your 30-hour workshop into 1.25 hours.
I have so enjoyed being with all of you. I thank you for this opportunity. I have a commitment and a real passion about working with people who are motivated and who really want to work. No greater joy.
And I wanted to mention that Kate will also be speaking at our conference in September, so I hope all of you can attend. And if you have any questions, you can email us at info@pxc.org or call the main office number, which is on your screen. And the webinar registration you can find from our homepage also. And very shortly you will be able to see all of our past webinars posted on the website. You'll be able to just click and view it like a video and hear the audio and video together. So once again, Kate, thank you so much, and I look forward to the next webinar.